Energy and access to it are the cornerstones of the Canadian economy. There is a trilemma of issues in play in British Columbia that present difficult choices. How do we ensure energy security, equitable accessibility, and environmental sustainability? What does the energy mix look like? Electricity and fossil fuels dominate. Are alternative energy sources a practical reality? Join me and our outstanding panel, Roger Dall'Antonia of FortisBC, Crystal Ball of the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee, Dan Kirshner of the Northwest Gas Association, and Barry Penner, former BC Minister of the Environment and Chair of BC Energy Futures. Hello, I'm Stuart McNish, and you're listening to Conversations Live. Conversations Live is a long-form public affairs dialogue series addressing the big issues of our time. For each episode, we bring together subject matter experts for a deep conversation designed to provide you with information that helps you make more informed decisions. I hope you enjoy it. The question tonight is how, in a world where we aim to meet climate objectives and maintain our modern economy, how can we eat our cake and have it too? Is it possible? How do we ensure energy security, equitable accessibility, and environmental sustainability? What does that energy mix look like? Electricity and fossil fuels dominate now and look to well into the foreseeable future. Are alternative energy sources a practical reality? What about solar, wind, geothermal? What about nuclear power? What about fusion? What role does conservation play? Welcome to Conversations Live. Tonight we come to you from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam and Squamish First Nations, known collectively as Kemkemale, the land of the Maples, whose people have lived on and continue to call these lands home. OCM. Conversations Live is a long-form public affairs dialogue series that seeks to advance our understanding of the big issues of our times. Our goal is to share ideas and insights that help each of us gain a greater understanding of our communities, our province, our country. There are many organizations that help us to host Conversations Live. We are only able to bring these events to you in person and live online thanks to organizations that support programming for engaged citizens. You will see the logos and names of these organizations scroll across to the bottom of the screen throughout the event. I can't thank these organizations enough. Our hosting sponsors are RBC, KPMG, and Macmillan LLP. Our annual sponsors are Digital, BD Developments, Polygon, Stem Cell Technologies, Helijet, Rennie & Co., Landlord BC, the Pacific Salmon Foundation, FortisBC, TC Energy, TELUS, and Marquee Wines. And Marquee Wines is kind enough to donate a gift certificate to each of our panelists, along with a corkscrew to open that bottle of delicious wine. So you'll find that there. Our panelists all, of course, get to take home the coveted Conversations Live mug, the swag that they get. And our other supporters are BCIT, Falkirk Consulting, the Goodman Report, and OPI, along with the BC Securities Commission. We work in association with Mario Conseco of Research Co., and our media partner is the Vancouver Sun. Live streaming services are provided by Oh Boy Productions. As I say, without the generous support of all of these organizations, this program would not be possible. Now, one last bit of business just before we start. For anyone, whether or not you're in the room here or online, you can submit a question by going to slido.com, enter the code Conversations Live, and send in your question. I'll get it here, and I will receive those questions and share them with our panelists where I can. And while I may not deliver your question verbatim, I will be motivated by your thoughts and ideas, and they'll help shape some of my questions this evening. Our topic tonight is, as I said, the challenge we face in ensuring access to energy at affordable rates today, tomorrow, well into the future, and also meet our climate objectives. How do we do that? Thus is the trilemma. Our panelists are Roger Dall'Antonia of FortisBC, Crystal Ball of the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee, Dan Kirshner of the Northwest Gas Association, and Barry Penner, former BC Minister of the Environment and Chair of BC Energy Futures Institute. We reached out to BC Hydro to ask them to join us, but unfortunately they were unable to accept the invitation. So Roger, I'd like to start with you. What challenges in particular are we facing right now that become pressing issues that we need to address if we want to make sure that 10 years from now we're not seeing shortfalls in our energy supply, especially under pressure?
I'm glad I get the easy question to start with.
Well, of course, yeah.
So first of all, really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thanks for the land acknowledgement. I think when we move forward with infrastructure, especially in this province, keeping reconciliation front of mind will be really important, and acknowledge we're on the Coast Salish people's territory for this important conversation. Maybe just as a bit of background setting, from an energy company perspective, utility perspective, we've been operating in the province for well over 100 years, delivering both gas and electricity, natural gas and electricity. So we take an agnostic view on the product we're delivering. We're really thinking that there's a customer or a community at the end of our system that we're trying to serve with energy that meets the trilemma. Is it sustainable as we need to take climate action? Is it resilient and reliable? We're facing greater and greater challenges with extreme weather, with greater and greater demands on energy, both electricity and natural gas. And most importantly, there's a customer that pays for this. Is it affordable? We can get into any one of those topics, but the challenge for us as utility providers is that for the last little while, we've brought in a very critical focus to climate. We absolutely have to take action on climate. But I think over the last 5 years, we started to see challenges around the other two legs of that stool. One is around reliability and resiliency. We've had more extreme weather events. We've had greater population growth. We're seeing more demands on energy from industry, artificial intelligence, demands like that, and we're dealing with an affordability crisis. So, how do we ensure that 10 years from now, to your question, we have the energy we need? I think it's really trying to address policy in a way that it does not focus on just one of the three elements. We do have to take a holistic view to energy planning that is not simply driven by one outcome, which is emissions. It's a critical one, but we're also ensuring that we're valuing things like capacity in our system, and we're understanding the limitations of our society to pay for these objectives. So it comes down to pace. We can do it, but it has to be measured in a way that's not leaving any one of those three stools behind.
So when you say pace, and I'll turn to you, Crystal, there is a push throughout the Pacific Northwest region to move towards net zero by 2045, if you look at the majority of jurisdictions. Are we aiming a little too close to our ability to meet that goal? And how does that then hamper our ability to plan appropriately?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with this distinguished group of panelists. I manage a trade association in the States for electric utilities and industry partners. And so the members of the trade association that I manage think about the planning. They think about the pace. And what I want to share is the concerns that electric utilities in the States have about reliability. And we see a significant increase in demand for electricity that is projected to grow over the next 10 years at a pace that is greater than we have seen before. It's unprecedented in our region and across the country and across the globe. This increasing demand for electricity to develop data centers that power digital technologies, basically our way of life. And on top of that, this new introduction of artificial intelligence. And the reliability concern comes from keeping up with that demand. The demand for electricity is also growing because of policies that are shifting these energy resources to electricity. So we're increasing demand for electricity in that way as well. And the resource additions that are needed to meet this increasing demand and keep the grid reliable are not keeping up. And so that pace is concerning because demand for electricity is growing, but the solutions are not being deployed at scale that we need. So when you talk about pace, it's in both of those things. Demand is increasing. We see evidence of that, but we don't see that we're able to develop the resources that we need to keep up with this demand and to make this transition to cleaner energy resources. So we need to really focus on that pace as well.
So in reading one of the reports that you shared with me, I was quite alarmed to see that the infrastructure development around being able to bring new power online is nowhere close to keeping pace with the increase in demand. Barry, I know that this is a big concern to you because in British Columbia, not only are we not bringing on those new sources of electrical generation, we're actually retiring some that may not need to be retired.
So we are, well, thankfully, we're building the Site C dam. It's almost complete. Several turbines are now spinning, and a few more to be completed by the end of the year. And then we'll look forward to getting the final price tag on that piece of infrastructure. It will not be inexpensive. The latest estimate is $16 billion, but I think many people are waiting to see the final cost. But it alone is not going to meet our electricity needs. And I think many people were kind of lulled into a sense of complacency for the past decade that it's taken to build the project. That would be our cure-all and would answer all of our electrification desires for decarbonizing the economy. I checked earlier today, we were importing about 1,100 megawatts per hour from the United States. And that's even with half of Site C operating today. So that's roughly comparable to the full maximum output of the Site C dam is what we've been importing today from the United States. And the Site C dam won't do 1,100 megawatts every day when it's in operation. On average, it'll do about 550 to 600. So it's not the answer to all of our challenges. So I often tell my clients, because I'm working in the private sector, when governments are talking, don't focus too much on what they're saying. Look at what they're doing. Actions speak louder than words. And while the government here and BC Hydro's played a good game in terms of explaining what they're doing, and that we shouldn't worry about being a net importer of electricity like we have been for the last 3 years, their actions say otherwise. They've issued a call for power, then they subscribed more power from that call than they said they were going to, and then after saying they'd wait 2 years before doing another call for power, they've just issued another one when the ink's barely dry on the last one for the contracts, and before the construction or permitting's even started for those, they've gone out to the market to ask for even more electricity again. That tells me that they recognize that being dependent on the United States like we are now for our electricity needs is not prudent. And this is something at Energy Futures we've been raising concerns about for some time. So we are bringing some more assets online or some more energy potential. But what's missing, has been missing, is looking for more firm capacity from the private sector. And so I was pleased to see that along with this call for power that was announced a few weeks ago, BC Hydro is also looking for expressions of interest, some ideas that might be out there for adding firm capacity in British Columbia. Now, people are assuming it might involve pumped storage. That's where you pump water up a hill and let it run back down again when you need the electricity and run the water through the turbines to generate that electricity. And then pump the water back up when you have excess electricity, maybe at nighttime. But just what form that will take is unknown, but it will likely be expensive. And the irony is that we currently have 450 megawatts of natural gas-fired electricity capacity that is dispatchable. We can turn it on when we need it, but the government at the same time is planning to get rid of it. At the same time that they're looking for new ideas for generation, we're actively taking steps to get rid of 450 megawatts of existing built infrastructure that is being used and was leaned on heavily as recently as February this year. Full output, 450 megawatts of all of our natural gas was needed to get us through that cold spell, as it was last summer when we had a hot, dry summer. And yet, about this time next year, we'll be in a position where we won't have those assets at our disposal because under the Clean BC policy, BC Hydro has been directed to get rid of natural gas power generation in a desire to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it goes to your point about this trilemma, the stool, the three-legged stool. We understand the desire for sustainability and reducing emissions, but there is the need to have reliability for the customer. That means availability, that the power is there when they need it, as well as affordability. And I'm just curious how much this maneuver will cost to scrap existing infrastructure that's already built and paid for and replace it with something that we don't know what the price will be, except I suspect it might be more.
Well, the key there is that it's natural gas-fired power generation. So, Dan, that's why I left the wrap-up position here on the opening salvo, because you represent Pacific Northwest Gas Association. And I will admit that naively, I was unaware of how vital the role is in power generation from natural gas to get the electricity that we want. And yet the whole industry is under the pressure of saying, okay, but you got to clean up your act. Where are we at there?
Well, so yeah, the natural gas, my members serve Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. FortisBC is a member. Really pleased about that. Thank you, Roger and team. Our members own and operate more than 200,000 kilometers of infrastructure today across that region. And they serve 3.5 million households directly, 350,000 businesses, institutions, and industry, with heat for space and water, as well as process heat, think your timber, et cetera, but also generation, to your point, Stuart. What we've seen is the region has taken this path to build more and more renewables, which are an intermittent resource, while at the same time retiring baseload resources. So in Oregon, one coal plant was retired 4 or 5 years ago. Another one, boiler, retired 4 or 5 years ago. Another one being retired this year. These are coal plants that operate as baseload resources, dispatchable resources, as well as kind of weaning off sort of out of market generation, baseload generation or dispatchable resources. And a consequence of that is the growth we've seen in demand on the natural gas system has been driven by fuel to generate electricity. So the pipeline systems have been operating they've seen growth in throughput of about 20% over the last 5 years or so, and haven't added a molecule of additional capacity. So what we have is this moment in time where in the winter, our system typically delivers heat. So winter time is where we peak, usually, although summer's getting up there now as we add more air conditioning across the region. But in the winter, we have the pipeline system was built originally 70 years ago to serve industrial load primarily. And then the commercial and the residential load came on, piggybacked on top of that. So 20 years ago, 50% of the throughput on those pipelines was industrial demand. That's demand that's being served 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. Today, it's 25%. And the other 75% is weather dependent demand. So when it gets cold, you have this tension between gas for pilot lights in homes, gas to heat homes and businesses, and gas to fuel electricity generation at the same time. So it's a growing tension. As I said, we've seen this significant growth in gas demand as a fuel for generating electricity.
So to help set our stage a little bit further, Derek, can we go to Mario's poll now, please?
When BC residents ponder the challenges posed by the Energy Trilemma, more than 3 in 5 say they are very concerned or moderately concerned about affordability and equity. Fewer than half express similar feelings about accessibility and security, while just over a third are worried about sustainability and environmental stewardship. At this point, BC residents feel the possibility of covering the cost of energy and ensuring that it is available for everyone is more crucial than securing its supply. Fewer than 1 in 10 BC residents think energy accessibility and security will be better a year from now, while more than half say it will be worse. This is the only one of the 3 aspects of the Energy Trilemma where a majority of BC residents expect the situation to deteriorate, an understandable reaction due to global conflicts in energy-producing countries, threats of tariffs from the United States, and lengthy regulatory frameworks in British Columbia. Just over 1 in 10 BC residents think energy affordability and equity in the province will be better in the next year, while 3 in 10 foresee no changes and more than a third predict a worsening situation. It is important to note that close to 1 in 4 BC residents are undecided about the future, at a time when concerns about inflation and higher prices have not subsided. The results are significantly better for the sustainability and environmental stewardship file, with almost 3 in 5 residents expecting no change from the current situation, and equal proportions believing things will be either better or worse 12 months from now. Only 11% of BC residents are undecided on this particular issue, a significantly lower level than what is observed in the other 2 categories. When the concept of the Energy Trilemma is explained to BC residents, there is a higher level of confidence in the ability of the federal government to tackle the challenges ahead in the next 5 years than for provincial and municipal administrations. There is a silver lining for municipal governments, as more than 2 in 5 residents are undecided on what they could do to help. The result is not ideal for the BC government, with almost half of BC residents considering that they are not properly prepared to deal with the situation in the next 5 years. For Conversations Live, I'm Mario Canseco from ResearchGo.
I think the message is clear. A lot of people are saying, I'm aware of this crunch that we're coming to. Crystal, how, playing off of what Dan just said, no new infrastructure addition in the last number of years. Where do we go from here? And how do we start to move forward to bring new resources online? Because in looking at the reports, it looks like we have a lot of projected infrastructure like on the books, but it doesn't necessarily materialize.
Utilities are feeling mounting pressure to add power generation resources to the grid, again, to meet that increasing demand and to keep the grid reliable. So the trade association that I manage, we put together a forecast. Let's acknowledge how funny it is that a woman named Crystal Ball working in the energy industry puts together a forecast. But we do, and it's an important product. It's a 10-year outlook. And when we look out, we see that utilities could need as much as 30,000 megawatts of electricity over the next 10 years, new generating resources. Wow. When we look back at 2020 to now, we see that utilities have been able to add about 5,000 megawatts. So resources are being developed, but they are not being developed at the pace that we need. And so we see a lot of wind, solar, and battery storage in that 5,000 megawatts of additional resources. But we have the concerns about retiring resources. And so these additions, are replacements, but they are not keeping up with the demand for electricity, which is significant. When we look out, again, we see about a 30% increase over the next 10 years in the demand for electricity, largely coming from industry, but also the transition to more electricity resources. And so, again, I think your question was, what are we doing about adding resources to our grid. We are doing it. We are likely doing it at a much slower pace than we need to keep up with the demand. And that is creating these reliability risks that are making leaders in our industry very anxious. But we recognize that natural gas and electricity systems are increasingly interdependent, and that these systems need to be planned very carefully. We also recognize that regional coordination is very important. And so Dan and I have engaged in an initiative with both of our members to build awareness about the increasing interdependence between natural gas and electricity. We're raising awareness about that interdependency so that we can get people together to really start working on the solutions.
So, Dan, to that point, I was reading, we say, we're going to remove the ability to heat your home with natural gas because it doesn't fit our climate objectives. So, but you now have to switch to use electrical means to warm your house. Well, what happens when we have a severe weather event the way that we did in January 2024? Do we have the capacity to meet that demand?
Well, I think that let me take a twist on that a little bit and talk about that event in 2024 just very briefly, where we lost some gas service. And it's really important for people to understand. What I said was we haven't added a molecule of capacity to the system in many years. That system for the last 5 years is averaging, we're using it 95% of what it's able to deliver on average. For the winter months of the last 5 years. Now, some months in those years, we were actually at 108%. You wonder, how does a pipeline deliver 108% of what it's capable of delivering? Well, when it's cold, you can pack a few more molecules in the pipe. So the point is, these pipelines are being heavily utilized during those winter months. So, there probably is a role for some electrification out there. I think one of the things I'd like to leave this group with, and your listeners and watchers, is there is no silver bullet for solving the energy trilemma. Heat pumps are not the silver bullet. Renewable energy is not the silver bullet. Natural gas is not the silver bullet. We need all of these things working together in an optimal way to move us down the pathway effectively toward good, solid decarbonization that remains affordable and reliable.
So, Roger, here in the Pacific Northwest, we do have access to considerable hydro resources. You take a look at the Peace River system, you look at the Columbia River system, and you go, well, we should be able to meet that demand. But what happens under our current drought situation to the flow, and then what happens to flow through those hydroelectric dams when we get into extreme cold weather events?
Yeah, this is one of the challenges where, as we're starting to talk more deeply about energy systems, the difference between peak energy, peak capacity, and annual energy, to pick up on what Dan was saying, is something that's often misunderstood. So just using BC as an example, on an annual average year, the gas system and the electric system, and we run, again, a smaller part of the BC electric system compared to BC Hydro, but on a combined basis, 60-odd terawatt hours a year delivered by combined electric system, and similar by the gas system, 61, 62 terawatt hours. But on the coldest days, when Dan was referring to the 108% throughput on the gas system, the gas system in BC has the capacity to deliver twice the amount of energy as the electric system. That's just based on how the two incumbent systems were built and designed over decades. So the challenge with more severe weather events and greater electrification of certain loads, when you have those severe weather events, and then you have issues where the new incremental resources on the electric side are made up of renewables. They're not as dispatchable in all weather situations. So if you're in a drought cycle where we've had lower water level behind the reservoirs, you're bringing on more renewables. If the renewables aren't there in a cold weather situation where there's not as much wind, which you see on the prairies, or solar is got at best a 20% capacity factor, maybe 25%. Half the year you're night, and then you also have other weather events. So, the challenge for renewables versus dispatchable, especially when you're dealing with more peak issues, which is what the gas system is really good at, is you become a little bit of a victim of not being able to control those elements. So that January weather event, which is January 2024, that was a regional cold spell. Alberta put out those orange, amber alerts, if people remember, looking for people to conserve energy. If you look at their resource stack, coal was available, 80 or 90%. Natural gas was similar, but their solar and wind resources were probably less than 20% available. So, the gas system was able to flex to carry the difference. So what do we do with a hydro system? Now, first of all, the hydro system is the envy of North America. We are very blessed to have such a phenomenal resource that British Columbians have invested in. And I love the fact that Site C is coming on. It's much needed, and I wish we had more Site Cs. So what do you do when you have more renewables and you have dispatchable resource and hydro that also can be subject to weather events? You start to think about how do you utilize those systems so that you're preserving water behind the dam while you're bringing on more renewables. It really becomes an operational challenge. There are things you can do. The call for power that BC Hydro has put out does have some benefit if you can keep water behind the dam for the winter. But the reality is, in very extreme weather events, we've had 3 winters in a row where we've seen colder and colder winter spells, right? Before, you used to see a 1 in 10 year event. Now we've had 3 consecutive winters where we've had those really cold spells. And if you get into not an annual cycle of drought, but a seasonal or cyclical drought, not seasonal, like you had in the Colorado River, you have to play catch up. And that's where you put more strain on the capacity of the electric system. What I would say to the work that Crystal and Dan are doing, the Western Energy Coordinating Council, which is the regulatory council that oversees the bulk electric transmission system from Alberta, BC down to California, they're part of one of the 6 regional transmission operators across North America. They came out with a report a couple years ago on the increased risk to gas and electric systems, mostly electric systems. But the new risk they identified was energy policy risk, which is kind of odd. But that energy policy risk is that there's a disconnect between energy policy that's thinking about things around climate, but not understanding the greater risks that we're facing on reliability and resiliency because the more demands on the electric system. So it's a bit of a wake-up call that these are like still low-risk events. Be calm, electric system's good. But if we don't start thinking about this from a long-term perspective and thinking about highest and best use of electrons, highest and best use of molecules, to make sure that we are thinking of this as an energy challenge, not a natural gas challenge or an electricity challenge, we're going to create a disconnect between policy and the need of the system to deal with more difficult, more extreme weather, that we'll end up creating a disruption which will be very impactful for people.
Crystal, yeah?
Yeah, could I add that really the development of the Columbia River and the other rivers in this region, this very interconnected region, they have given our region an environmental and an economic advantage. But when you think about flow, you said flow.
Yeah.
And when that water is available to generate a lot of hydroelectricity, that's when the river is flowing at its highest, and that's in the spring. And that's not when we use the most electricity or natural gas. So the region needs a mix of resources to ensure that we have a reliable system, that the electricity is there when we need it most.
Barry.
I agree with all of what's been said in the last few minutes here. One of the challenges that we are facing is it does take so long to bring those new resources online. Crystal mentioned what the plans looking forward are saying we need, what the forecasts are, but we haven't developed nearly that amount in the last 10 years. We just haven't proven that we're nimble. It was, I think, 2010, when then Premier Gordon Campbell announced that the province would go ahead with building the Site C dam. And it's now 2025, and it's not quite completed. So it's been almost a full 15 years, and it's almost there. So we really do have to think about planning forward. Something that has intrigued me, one of the scarcities is not just energy, but it is the money to pay for it. And we talk about an affordability crisis. So it's made me wonder, what is the most cost-effective way of trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions if we're looking at doing it through changing our energy consumption? Heat pumps are often touted as salvation, but they are costly. So I'm just going to tease a little report that's going to be coming out shortly from Energy Futures Institute. We've commissioned Professor Jerome Gesaroli at BCIT School of Business to crunch some numbers for us, and it looks like going to strictly using electric heat pumps come in at a cost of about $450 per metric ton of CO2 avoided. If we could embrace hybrid heating systems, that's a heat pump married to a natural gas furnace, we can get almost the same, not quite, but very significant greenhouse gas reductions, but at a cost of about half. So in an era of limited financial resources, I know sometimes governments act like resources are unlimited, but they are, despite what politicians act like. Ultimately, there is a limit to how much the public purse can afford and how much individuals can pay. So we're going to be taking a deeper dive into that and look for that next week.
So, Dan, why is it that we haven't seen any molecule increase in the system? What is preventing the development of those extra resources?
I think part of it's it's difficult to build the facilities. When we talk about infrastructure, on the electric side, there's generation, but there's also transmission, the long linear lines that need to, transmit the power from where it's being generated to where it's being consumed. Typically, on the gas side, there's pipelines, right, that deliver the molecules from where they're being produced to where they're being consumed. And it's hard to build that kind of stuff because it feels disruptive, and a lot of people get worked up over expanding pipeline capacity. That's part of it. I think another part of it is we're in a place where each sort of provider or potentially shipper kind of looks to their own needs, and it's really hard to generate a critical mass commercially around the need for pipeline expansions, right? I think we're starting to see that happen now. We're starting to see folks come in with small increments and say, yes, I'll sign up for this increment of capacity. And so you'll start to see incremental expansions. You might not see new steel pipe in the ground, but you might see expansions of compression capacity, for instance, that will help offset some of this stuff. Enbridge Pipeline, the West Coast Pipeline, which they're in the process right now of trying to expand their system to accommodate a new load that's coming on, actually, with the wood fiber LNG plant that will come online in a little bit. But it's a difficult process. Pipelines are not built on spec. Pipeline operators don't go out and just say, hey, I'm going to build a pipe and hope people come along to sign up for it. They got to have people committed to pay for it first. And so getting that critical mass of commercial interest in it is hurdle one. But once you have that, hurdle 2, 3, 4, and 5 are getting the social license to build it.
Well, that brings Crystal, and then I'll go to an interesting point that came up in Mario's poll.
Oh, yeah. I will just add on the expanding the system. Demand for electricity had not been growing for many, many years. It's just in the last few years that we have seen a projected increase in demand for electricity, demand for energy. And so, we are really the industry is not used to building infrastructure. We had built a lot of infrastructure, and that infrastructure has been, I would say, used up, fully allocated. And so it's time really to kind of think of this mindset of building infrastructure, and that is very, very hard to do. It takes a lot of coordination, and it's something that utilities kind of got out of practice because demand had not been increasing.
Dan.
Just one thing to add. So why is it hard to get commercial interest? Well, when you talk about needing extra pipeline capacity to serve a couple weeks a year, remember this pipeline capacity, these pipelines were built to serve an industrial load first and a residential and commercial load sort of coattailed on them, right? So if you have to build a pipeline, sorry, I was blocking the antenna there. Yeah. If you have to build a pipeline to serve just a short period of time, whether it's for generation to fuel electric generation or to fuel just some winter heat, that's a pretty expensive proposition.
So whose responsibility is it? When I took a look at Mario's poll, he asked people, who do you think is best suited to be able to handle some of the issues regarding the development? They put more emphasis on the feds than they did the province, and very, very little on municipal. But municipalities and cities get into the process. Roger.
This is a topic near and dear to my heart. My folks, my people I work with, we talk about this all the time. At the heart of this discussion is climate action, right? Sustainability and energy. Energy systems are like one of the 6 critical infrastructure systems that we all rely on, and sometimes people forget that, right? Healthcare, food, water, wastewater, sanitation, transportation, energy. You take any one of those away, you got serious situation with functioning of society. So when you think about, who's responsible for climate, which is a global challenge, when you think about long linear infrastructure that needs to be planned over years, one of the challenges to why it's taking so long to build, and it's not just a gas issue, there's lots of examples of electric transmission that get mired in court challenges, even though they're connecting renewable energy. This is a challenge for any infrastructure builder. This should be thinking about, if climate's a global challenge, that's federal jurisdiction. There are regional differences, so the provinces have a direct role over their jurisdiction. You get down to the municipal level, you get down to the regional district level, you end up creating a pancaking of different policies that actually can block taking needed climate action. Can create risk and cost to making infrastructure investment. I think this is something that should be at a minimum planned as a system that serves the region, so province and states getting together, but ultimately there should be a say federally, because if we're trying to solve the trilemma, and one of them is climate, that's going to be a nation state issue. A municipality declaring a climate emergency, which is valid, but then making a decision on the energy choice without the responsibility of the safety and reliability and the affordability and the resiliency that goes with delivering that energy, strikes me as the most inefficient way to approach this problem. So to policymakers out there, I really think this is a provincial and federal situation, and the Fed's role is bringing the provinces together to think about the interconnectedness that we need to deal with these regional challenges.
So Barry, to you on the same point, especially if we take a look at the city of Vancouver and their ban on any new natural gas installation, how does that have an impact on our ability to plan out the resources that we're going to need moving forward?
Well, when Vancouver and Saanich and Victoria and Nanaimo and Richmond and Burnaby, and I'm sure there's others, Whistler, prohibit effectively the use of natural gas for home and commercial heating, it necessarily puts a greater burden on the BC Hydro or the other electric utilities to deliver more electricity at exactly the time when our electricity system is maxed out, which is on those cold days that we talked about. And that has been our concern at Energy Futures, which is why we're looking into, this, taking a deeper dive, looking at hybrid heating systems, because they have the opportunity to use natural gas during the very coldest days and take that pressure off the electrical system, and then use electricity when the weather isn't as extreme, for the other 95% of the year. Use electricity, and you'll get the benefits of the efficiency that come with heat pumps without the huge extra capital costs that will be required to build out our peak electricity delivery system and generation, and everything in between, from substations to transformers and new power plants. If we can think through this, I think we can get there. But leaving it to individual municipalities to try to become armchair energy experts, I think, is really irresponsible. I think there is a reason why provinces traditionally have set energy policy in this country. It's not just because of the Constitution, but because it makes sense. So I think in British Columbia, there is an opportunity for the province to show leadership and say, municipalities, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but really this is something that needs to have a province-wide approach rather than a patchwork. It's too expensive and risky. And do what Quebec has done and said, we're going to rein in municipal government's ability to legislate in this area because we are responsible provincially for maintaining the holistic energy supply. And also have our picture on the energy and as well as the environmental issues, but bring that back to the provincial level where it was originally.
Crystal, and then Roger. Yeah.
Thank you, Roger. I will just add that it is a complicated, interconnected system. And even for those of us that work in it every day, we are learning from each other all of the time. We are, again, interconnected across our region. We have a long history of collaborating in the states with the province. And so it just is very important to really double down on that collaboration and coordination. Very complicated, interconnected system. Needs very careful planning.
Roger?
Yeah, just picking up on the natural gas bans or zero carbon step code that's going to limit the ability to use natural gas for heating or hot water. We provide natural gas and electricity in the city of Kelowna. It's one of the fastest growing cities in Canada. So we've done a study on electrification. We've have about 67,000 electric customers, about 45,000 gas customers. But as just sort of a frame of reference, those 45,000 gas customers on a peak cold day take about 900 megawatts of energy equivalency. Our electric system has been designed for about 350, 400 megawatts on our summer peak, which is our air conditioning load. So with those, smaller customer base, larger energy use, because it takes more energy to take a, minus 25 temperature to plus 20 versus, plus 40 down to a comfortable 25. That's just physics. So we looked at the, different toggles, EV adoption, greater heat pump penetration, population growth over a wide range of temperatures to map out what happens with 100% heat pump adoption, greater EV adoption. What is the impact on the electric system in the city of Kelowna? Heat pumps are super efficient. The ones that are coming out now today on market are about 200% efficient. But the problem with heat pumps is there is a degradation curve when you get to colder and colder weather that they lose their efficiency and they just become basically a baseboard heater, resistance heater. So what happens if you were to go for those 10 coldest days of the year, if you're going solely heat pumps in a winter peaking market, it's not a situation in certain, we're talking about, BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, the requirement for the electric capacity triples. So when you think about the heat pump costs that Barry's referring to, you have to also think about the electric infrastructure, the size of the straw or the wires delivering electricity, the increased generation for those colder days. So this isn't an argument to do nothing. Like, far from it. We did the study to understand in different scenarios of heat pump adoption what is required for the gas system, what's required for the electric system. And what we found is the use of hybrid heating, which Barry so eloquently described. It really says, okay, use the gas system for the coldest days of the year, use the electric system for 10 months out of the 12. Your overall energy use is down because you're getting the most out of the efficiency of an electric heat pump. You're not having the same degradation in cold weather as you do if you're sticking with a high efficient gas furnace. So your overall energy efficiency goes above 100%. You're avoiding the most expensive part of the electric build-out, which is transmission for cold weather. And you're getting an emissions reduction. So it's advocating for less gas use, but making sure it's used where it's most efficient, and adopting electric where it's most efficient with a heat pump, which is summer heating. So, it's really, how do you think of the two incumbent systems working most efficiently to avoid putting one incumbent system to the side and then having to overbuild an electric system in a short time frame, 2030 targets, 2035 targets, 5-10 years from now. So I think, this is really a way to think for policymakers to look at how do you marshal the two incumbent systems over the next 10-15 years as you move to a 2050 target where there will be less gas use through the system.
That's what I meant to say.
That's what I heard you say, Barry.
Dan.
So I just want to expand a little bit on Crystal's point. She's used the word 2 or 3 times, interconnected. And I think it's important for this audience, both online and in this room, to understand how interconnected we are. You heard Barry talk about BC today is importing 1,100 megawatts an hour, did you say? From the US, right? That's an interconnection. But the US states that are in my jurisdiction, 70% of the natural gas that they consume comes from Canada. Alberta, British Columbia. The bulk of it for Seattle and Portland, obviously, comes from British Columbia. We are an interconnected energy region, and I think that's an important thing to really
understand.
understand.
That transfer of energy back and forth across the border affected by the tariffs that are now being imposed by the Trump administration?
I can say, headed south, the natural gas that we consume south of the border is not affected. It's CUSMA compliant, so it's not affected. Can't ever remember if it's USMCA or CUSMA.
We say CUSMA.
Okay, so I got it right.
Yeah.
Good. It is CUSMA compliant, so it's not affected. The natural gas is not affected by tariffs. Now there's some, idiosyncrasies or twists in there, but the natural gas that we consume south of the border is not affected.
And Barry?
Yeah, initially the executive order signed by President Trump would have imposed a 10% tariff on energy exports from Canada to the United States for natural gas, oil, and for something called, in the legal drafting of the executive order, the kinetic energy of flowing water. Nowhere does the word electricity appear, but I assume that means that's what they're trying to get at, which is ridiculous when you think about it, asking regulators or utilities on the U.S. side of the border to try and discern which electrons might be coming from hydropower versus wind or natural gas generation or what have you. Thankfully, after a couple of days, President Trump suspended that and said, well, so there's an order in place. I think it's temporary, but until it's changed, it is what Dan says. As long as the electricity and, all the energy exports from Canada to the U.S. are compliant with the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Free Trade Agreement, which still is on the books, although sometimes a certain president acts like it isn't, then the tariffs will not apply to those energy exports. And what does that mean, compliant?
Flowing both north and south?
Well, the tariffs would only have applied going south. Canada did not get around to imposing tariffs on energy coming from the U.S., which is probably a good thing, since we're importing electricity on a net basis from the U.S. and have been for about 20% of our electricity needs here in British Columbia. We're into our 3rd year now of doing that in a row. So what does it mean to be compliant with the trade agreement? It means that the energy was sourced from within Canada and didn't just get offloaded. Very hard to offload electricity, from a barge or whatever, but maybe LNG could have been imported and then shipped into pipes. So as long as we can demonstrate that our natural gas going to the United States is not coming from another source before it gets into pipelines in Canada, but actually originates in Canada, then for now, it is exempt from the 10% tariff. But that kind of sword of Damocles is hanging there. It's just kind of been suspended, but the original executive order is still there.
So I'm also fascinated by the fact that coal-fired electrical generation has basically been retired. And not 100%, but it is on the way out. We're seeing Diablo Canyon in California slated to close, even though Governor Newsom has extended the life a little bit. I don't know what the nuclear situation is in Washington State, but I became fascinated by this concept of small nuclear reactors. That was until I talked to Alison McFarlane out at UBC, who had been on the Obama government's Atomic Energy Commission. I've got a short clip of here. Just if you can roll that SME clip for us, Derek. What is an SMR?
So
Sorry.
there isn't any official definition. The unofficial definition is a nuclear power reactor that is smaller than 300 megawatts electric. And so most of the nuclear reactors out there in the world, in Canada and in the US and Japan, Europe, are large reactors. They produce between around 600 megawatts to over 1,000 megawatts per reactor.
These are massive.
That's basically, we only have extra large reactors operating. Small modular reactors are an idea, but they're not yet a reality.
And is that not one of the issues that we face? Because people will look at our panel and go, well, you're focused on gas and electric. Aren't there alternatives? So kind of to wrap up, there's a question here from one of our viewers. In your ideal world, and I'll ask you all to answer this question, what does a sustainable, reliable energy system look like that also includes affordability? Barry, I saw you want to jump in right away, so we'll start with you.
I do. I just wanted to respond to that. Maybe since that interview, Premier Ford's government in Ontario has announced that they will move forward and hopefully build, or they're hoping to build, the first so-called small modular reactor in North America.
No, it would be in Canada, because Westinghouse did one in the United States and it just about bankrupted the country, according to Alison McFarlane.
I'll stand corrected. I didn't know it was operating. But the cost estimate today for a small 300 megawatt facility is $21 billion.
And it's supposed to be smaller.
That's with a B. And you know, I'm having palpitations over the $16 billion cost of Site C. This is $21 billion, and it's a lot smaller. It's 300 megawatts. You know, although it would be firm power, Site C will give us on average about 550 megawatts in an average water year for $16 billion. So it gives you an idea of the cost differential. It is expensive. My understanding is there are maybe one or two operating, perhaps in China, perhaps in Russia, but there's not a lot of transparency about how those are performing, what the real costs were, as you would imagine.
And according to Ms. McFarlane, they use a fuel source that we don't produce here, is only produced in Russia. So it's not a practical option. Add in the fact that we're in a seismic zone. So back to the original question here, or the final question, what does a sustainable, reliable, and affordable energy system look like from your perspective, Barry? And we'll work our way down the panel.
So we're doing some of the things right, you know, looking for some more intermittence and diversifying. British Columbia's been depending, in terms of electricity, for more than 90% of our eggs have been placed in the hydroelectric basket. And as we've seen during this last 3 years of below average precipitation, and unfortunately we're in another year of disappointing snowpack, 30% below average again. You know, you can't always count on the water to show up when you need it. So we're behind the curve, but we are starting to diversify our energy sources, but they're intermittent. And there is a limit. I don't know where it is, but somewhere there is a limit to how much you can rely on the water behind the dams as a natural battery to store that. BC Hydro may know, but we haven't been told. What is the upper limit of integrating intermittent renewables into our existing hydroelectric system? I don't know. I hope they do, but we haven't heard.
Well, it's important that we're having these conversations for this very reason. Dan.
Yeah, so I think I'll just start by saying Roger said it already. It's how do we optimally use the incumbent systems that are in place today? How do we use the molecule in the best use at the right time in the right application, right? And how do we do the same with the electrons? But that requires thinking about these two, what are currently thought of as separate systems, as one system of delivering energy, right? And so that, to me, that's how we, and that's going to require planning in an integrated way, which today we don't really do. And there's reasons for that. I mean, it's hard for an electric planner to think about what is a design day. That's how the gas planner plans their system. And for a gas planner to think about what's N-1 in a reserve margin. Not quite sure how that maps over into the gas system, using a lot of terms here, but integrating, moving toward more integrated planning. I think the BC UC actually asked BC Hydro and FortisBC to enter into a little exercise that's a tiny step toward trying to identify where some of these things are. So planning these systems as a one integrated energy delivery system is how we can think about how do we decarbonize in an affordable and a reliable way.
Just to start off, I want to bring it back to the affordability discussion because we focused a lot on the system challenges, right? But and Mario Canseco had some really interesting data. We have some data as well. We serve 1.3 million homes and businesses and institutions across the province. There's an organization called Efficiency Canada. They have data where they suggest you're considered to be in energy poverty if more than 6% of your total income is directed to your household energy needs. So electricity, natural gas, your vehicle. So that's a pretty low number. And when you even with that low threshold of 6%, 7%, they estimate that in BC, 10% of the population is in energy poverty, right? And there's other data that shows that 30% of British Columbians are basically have no flexibility to deal with a financial shock. They would go insolvent. That's not from an energy perspective, just generally. So I just want people we run contact centers. We talk to our customers every day. The challenge on affordability is very real, and it's very stressful for families. And we've got lots of folks who are in low income groups. So we do have to give real consideration to the importance of prioritizing affordability. This is, again, not an argument to do nothing. We have to take climate action. But the cost issue, I bring it back to a question of pace. How do we take action in the near term, the no regret action, demand side management, no regret, get people to use less energy, the midterm and the long term. So for me, if I think about the scenario or your questions, Stu, I look at it from an emissions pie perspective, right? Not so much, hey, should you electrify, trying to pick an energy system. I think of this as, or even decarbonize, saying that carbon is necessarily the challenge. It is, but not quite the way I think we're thinking about it. If you think about this as an emissions challenge and an energy challenge, I think about transportation. That's 40% of emissions in British Columbia. It's similar in other jurisdictions. So there's lots of steps we can take to decarbonize, to take emissions out of transportation. So passenger fleet adoption of EVs makes total sense. LNG, hydrogen for heavy duty fleets, again, all and above solution. If we can take that 40% of emissions and get that down to something that's much more reasonable, then you think about industrial processes where you can bring electrification, hydrogen, low carbon energy. That's about 25% of our emissions in BC. So now you're at 2/3 of our emissions in two sectors. And then you think about, okay, if you're trying to deal with affordability, there's lots of action we can take in the near term around demand side management, hybrid heating systems. We have a project. I got to throw a shout out to my demand side management team and my policy team. We have a couple of buildings in downtown Vancouver. They are older buildings, high rises, residential. We undertook deep energy retrofits on those buildings. So we have gas absorption heat pumps on the roof to take the heating load, more than 100% efficient. We've combined those with solar hot water pre-treated system for the hot water exchange in the system. I've done a building envelope retrofit. We've reduced emissions, target reduction of emissions about 66%. Energy uses reduction is about 60%. No new electric load. We haven't had to rewire the system. No new peak electric load, I should say. So there's an example of using the two systems, new technology, with a holistic view, and we're seeing emissions and energy use reduction. So if you could say right now, you could take 60% of the emissions out of the equation, that's a great step to get to net zero. So we have to start thinking about these in bite-sized chunks about what does the emission pie look like, not just simply taking a sectoral target that each segment of the pie has to reduce, when there's ways to fuel switch to make sure you're making the best use of the energy to get the most cost-effective emissions reduction.
Crystal.
I really like the way you think, Roger. And look, we've made tremendous progress on transitioning to cleaner energy. And just because of the things that we've talked about, it doesn't mean that we should let up on that progress. And ideally, for me, an energy system is a mix of resources. It is one that is reliable, and it shows up for us on the days when we need it most, on those coldest of days and on those warmest of summers, because let's face it, we're using electricity to cool many things that we haven't done in the past either. And so it is a mix of resources. It is carefully balanced, and we recognize how interconnected we all are.
And we are interconnected, and there's a tremendous amount of thought, energy, expertise that goes into looking at the challenges ahead of us. Final question to each of you. As you look forward, are you optimistic about our ability to meet the challenge ahead of us?
I'll start.
Yeah?
I'm optimistic.
Great. Roger?
Yeah, very optimistic.
I'm seeing partnerships being developed like the ones between Crystal's industry and my industry that make me super optimistic that we can get there from here.
I'm trying hard to be. And I think it will be okay, because the voters, I think, are ahead of the politicians. I think the politicians are still not haven't quite caught up yet, that the voters are interested in more than just sustainability. Yes, that's important, reducing emissions, but they also are focused on the here and now, and the politicians will have to respond to that.
Well, I want to thank all of you for joining this panel. Initially, when I started to dig into the research, I went to the pessimistic side. I started to get scared. But as we talk, I realized that there is a tremendous amount of thought and energy from like really well-informed and intelligent people that are going to solve these problems. And we didn't even really talk about innovation. So I agree with you. I come away from this saying I'm optimistic that we will meet that challenge. And I want to thank you for being on the panel tonight. Remember, you get to take home your coveted Conversations Live mug. And this tonight wraps up our 24-25 season. We're going to take the summer off and be back in September. So thank you to all of you who joined us in person and to all of those who joined us online. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into Conversations Live, an Oh Boy Productions program. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can find our previous and upcoming episodes at conversationslive.ca. You can also follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Again, thank you. I'm Stuart McNish.